Augustine chapter 9. Calm, rational, even-tempered, cool as a Scottish summer. That's how Leslie Probyn liked to think of himself. These were the qualities he had worked to cultivate as a colonial administrator. But today, those words seemed far away. He was infuriated. Despite the mahogany-bladed fan whirring above his head and the louvered windows of his large office flung open to let in a cool breeze, he was sweating profusely. He was unused to sweat. Though white and pot-bellied, and having lived the past many years in countries whose climates were so unlike his native England, Sierra Leone, Nigeria, Grenada, Barbados, and now Jamaica, he had always been able to keep his perspiration in check by the sheer force of his will. He asserted a cool stronger than the humidity that pressed around him. When inspecting the guards, for instance, decked out in his colonial uniform, his thick jacket and trousers, the various medals and insignia of office weighing down his shirt, and on his head a helmet with white plumes of feathers bursting out from its top, he would take pleasure in stopping before the most nervous guard, observing as beads of sweat sprouted on the poor guard's forehead, then rolled down. And all the while, Probyn himself would remain as powder dry as a withered corpse. "You think this is a place for only black man, eh?" He thought the words in his head, but would never say them aloud. He took a perverse pleasure in mentally practicing the pidgin language of whatever place he was posted to. "Look at me and look at you. Nah, look, you're to drown in your own sweat." And Probyn imagined that, after a time, a measure of respect and awe would emanate from the guard towards him, a kind of concession of his right to be there and to govern. Thus satisfied, he would nod and continue his inspection. But today was different. Tributaries of perspiration ran down from the governor's forehead onto his clothes, while sweat stains were spreading out from his armpits at an alarming rate, threatening to consume his entire shirt. He had already begun to unbutton the shirt, and would soon call Mr. Peabody to fetch him a replacement. "Damn Yankee! What give him the right?" he muttered as he turned another page of the book that was causing this great profusion, opening up his usually closed pores and causing his body to drain onto itself. Jamaica was the hardest assignment he had been given so far. 3 hurricanes in 3 years, bam, 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 had not so much paved the road from his arrival as gouged out the road and filled it with potholes. A flattened St. Mary meant that the island, banana country as it was supposed to be, had not actually seen a ripe variety of the fruit since 1915. Sugar cane had fared no better. Waterlogged fields meant that whatever crop came to harvest was all too fresh and virtually useless. And this was not the half of it. The economic tensions paled in comparison to the social tension. The island was on edge. You could feel it. Probyn had arrived to find the fairer-skinned Jamaicans desperate for a governor who would bring back slavery, in all but name, of course, insisting that the blacks were now so completely out of control that they posed a great danger, not just to white Jamaicans, but even to themselves. On the other hand, the darker-skinned Jamaicans felt that not much had changed since slavery. They wanted a governor who could give them freedom in more than just name, better wages for starters, and the right to vote, and laws that would protect them from abusive employers. In a sense, it was all par for the course. If not with the same intensity, Probyn had experienced tensions of a similar nature in every post he had worked in so far. But if he exuded calm, it was because he internalized everything. He suppressed things, making him an altogether dangerous man. His calm demeanor was like that of a volcano, a seeming tranquility on the surface, but something hot and bubbling underneath. If it was easy for him to absorb the general tensions in a society, It was harder for him to deal with criticism directed at him and his administration, which is why the book he was reading was causing such an eruption. He had been given it the night before at a party in Irish Town. It was one of those houses that open onto a huge veranda, and the veranda then opened onto a wide green lawn. Nowhere he could think of did verandas quite like the colonies, and none of the colonies did verandas quite like Jamaica. He knew it was the thing he would miss most when it was time for him to be reassigned. The garden had been full of birds of paradise, bougainvillea and the red poinsettia that signaled the Christmas season. It was a pleasant evening, and with the help of the sherry he was sipping, Probyn was inclined to think of these flowers as more beautiful than any English rose. He had been encompassed in conversation with the hostess of the night. A protocol dictated, Mr. Peabody, his secretary and assistant, stood to one side. Probyn was complimenting the hostess on the evening, and she, with appropriate deference, was thanking His Excellency for gracing them with his presence. Out of the corner of his eye, Probyn spotted Richard Azar stamping in. He was a brash businessman whom Probyn didn't particularly like, but he was powerful, and so the governor knew he had to tolerate him. Azar was clutching a book in one hand and his wife in the other. He held both of them like trophies. "Leslie! Leslie, my good man!" Azar shouted from across the room. Probyn grimaced at the familiarity. Azar stumped his way towards the group. He was now holding the book above his head. "Leslie, have you read this? I brought this copy just for you. Didn't I, Diana? Didn't I say we would surely see Leslie tonight, and I had to put his book in his hands?" His wife nodded. "Yes, you did say that, darling." "Cross bastard," Probyn thought to himself. "Have you read it, Leslie? Imagine, this is how these damn Yanks see us. Have you read it?" "Mr. Azar, might you be so kind as to actually show me the piece of literature you're referring to? I may have read it. I may not have. I'm rather in the dark here." But Probyn already had a fair idea of what the book was. Between 1917 and 1918, a fellow by the name of Harry A. Frank had been skipping from Caribbean island to Caribbean island. Now, 2 years later, he had published a book about those travels, roaming through the West Indies. It had been creating quite a stir. Azar shoved the book into the governor's hand. "This book, man, for God's sake, this book, roaming through the blasted West Indies. You have to read it, and then we have to talk. And let me tell you what the awful thing is. The fucker is bloody right. Excuse my language, ladies. But every goddamn word of it. I'm tired of saying it, you know, Leslie. And mark you, you're not the first governor I've said it to. But these Jamaican niggers are spoiling things for everybody." Probyn flinched. To his ears, Azar was a mulatto man. In England, he would most certainly be considered colored. His father was Syrian. His mother looked the same, but was actually some mixture of white and black. But Probyn knew that despite this mixed heritage, and Azar's olive skin and dark eyes, he lived on an island in which he was considered lily white. Indeed, Azar would be offended if you suggested he was anything but. His wealth only confirmed his island whiteness, as did his position as president of the Chamber of Commerce, and always in Azar's mind it was the blacks who were ruining things for him. Gentlemen, gentlemen," cried the hostess, trying to intervene, "this is not a night for politics." But these were words she often said, and, as always, she was being disingenuous. Mrs. Selina Jackman quite liked the idea that her house was a place where important things happened and important conversations were had. "Yes, I know, Selina, I know. But just hear me out for a second. We have to think of this island like a brand, like Ray and Nephew. You know what I mean. Brand Jamaica. That's what I say. And these Negroes, they're spoiling the brand. Their behavior these days is just getting more and more obstreperous. Obstreperous, his wife corrected him meekly. Yes, whatever the goddamn word is, you know what I mean. Read the thing, Leslie, and you'll see that it's an embarrassment to all of us. A real embarrassment. I think you will find, Mr. Azar, that the Negroes will be disinclined to change their behavior if there is no real benefit to them doing so. Certainly, that was my experience in West Africa. Yes, exactly, Leslie, exactly. Like bloody Africans, these Jamaican Negroes have to change their behavior if they want to progress. That wasn't quite my point. Well, we have to talk through these things, and soon, Leslie. Soon. As a matter of fact, how is tomorrow? I am afraid my schedule might not permit, but already Mr. Azar had turned to Mr. Peabody. Mr. Peabody, how is the governor's schedule looking for tomorrow? Mr. Peabody, who had been working at King's House for the best part of a decade, and who had watched 3 governors come and go, was immediately deferential to Mr. Azar. His Excellency can accommodate you at 11 a.m., Mr. Azar. Fantastic, Mr. Peabody, fantastic. Put me in for that time. He turned back to the governor and clapped him on the shoulder. So I'll see you tomorrow, Leslie, and read the damn thing. Outrageous, man. Outrageous! Sir Leslie Probyn had therefore already been bristling with anger from the night before, and this morning, sitting in his King's House office, reading the chapter that his uppity mulatto had instructed him, the governor, to read, was giving him palpitations. And it read, "The insolence of nearly all the British West Indies reaches its zenith in Kingston. The town is dismal, disagreeable, and unsafe for self-respecting white women at any hour. By night, it is virtually abandoned to the lawless black hordes that infest it. Weak gaslights give it scarcely a suggestion of illumination. Swarms of Negroes shuffle through the hot dust, cackling their silly laughter, shouting their obscenity, heckling, if not attacking, the rare white men who venture abroad, love making in perfect indifference to the proximity of other human beings, while the pompous black policemen look on without the slightest attempt to quell the disorder. The white residents of Kingston seem to live in fear of the black multitude that make up the great bulk of the population. When hoodlums and rowdies jostle them on the street, they shift aside with a slinking air. Even when black hooligans cling to the outside of streetcars, pouring out obscene language, the white men do not shield their wives and daughters beside them by so much as raising their voice in protest. The few white officials are slow, antiquated, precedence-ridden, in striking contrast to the young and bustling, if sometimes poorly informed, rulers of their own dependencies. Indeed, a journey to the West Indies is apt to cause the American to rearrange his notions of the relative efficiency of the English, and the French or ourselves as colonizers. We are sadly in need of a colonial office and a corps of trained officials to administer what we dislike to call our colonies. But even our deserving Democrats, or Republicans, as the case may be, scarcely hamper the development of our dependencies as thoroughly as do its medieval-minded rulers that of Jamaica." End of quote. Probyn took the book and hurled it across the room. It found the large black and white photograph of King Edward and shattered the frame. There was a banging at the door. "Your Excellency, is everything okay?" "It's all right, Mr. Peabody. Just give me a moment, and fetch me a shirt, please." "Yes, sir," Mr. Peabody said from behind the door. Probyn sighed. He still hadn't forgiven the man for his betrayal the night before. Remembering the 11 a.m. meeting, he looked up at the clock. 20 minutes. Probyn crossed the room with a sheet of paper. He knelt and tried to sweep the splinters onto the sheet. He winced as one of the shards pierced his index finger. A bright bubble of blood appeared on the tip. He licked it away and pressed the finger against his trousers to stop the bleeding. There was a knock at the door again. "Your Excellency?" Yes, Mr. Peabody, come in. Mr. Peabody entered, observed the shattered frame, but said nothing. Your shirt, sir, handing a fresh white shirt to the governor. And your 11 o'clock is early. Shall I send them in? Them? Probyn tried to keep his annoyance in check. No, I'll not be ready to see them until 11. He pointed to the splinters. Please get someone to clear that up. Yes, sir. Peabody disappeared, and Probyn peeled the soaked shirt off his body. He stood directly under the fan for a moment, and then put the fresh shirt on. A maid arrived and cleared away the debris, and at 11:10, Azar and 2 other gentlemen were ushered into the governor's office. Probyn knew that the Richard Azar he was about to speak with was a slightly different man from the one he had met the night before. There was nothing jovial about this Azar. This was the hard-as-nails businessman. Leslie, Azar greeted him, I believe you already know Tommy Delgado and Keith Thompson from the chamber as well. The men nodded, shook hands, and took a seat. Probyn knew the 2 extra men would say little during the meeting. They were there as a kind of decoration and a show of power. He, Richard Azar, could invite whomever he wanted to the governor's office. So, how can I help you, Richie? Probyn began almost spitefully. He had never called Richard Azar by his first name, let alone the diminutive Richie. But he enjoyed watching the man squirm, and he knew it was a good tactic to start such meetings by throwing people off balance. Richard Azar adjusted his tie. Your Excellency, he began more appropriately, we could talk till the bloody cows come home about all the awful things happening in the country. The hooliganism and rampant disorder and all the things I'm sure you read about in that fellow's book. Disgraceful. But we're busy men, so let me get to the most pressing matter at hand. We are concerned about this fellow Bedward, the one from Augustown. You've heard of him, of course. Ah, Probyn thought. He should have guessed. If it wasn't this Marcus Garvey fellow, it was Alexander Bedward. Both men seemed to have a knack for getting under the skins of high Jamaican society. Yes, I've heard of Mr. Bedward. And you have been hearing this malarkey about him going to fly. You even heard such stupidness? Mr. Delgado and Mr. Thompson tittered. Probyn kept a straight face. Mr. Azar, we've all heard about Bedward's lunatic prophecy, but I'm not sure why this is the most pressing matter. Azar slammed his hand on the table, causing even the governor to jump. What do you mean you don't see why this is a pressing matter? He bellowed. Look here, Mr. Governor. With all due respect, you don't seem to understand how things work on this island. This is the Christmas season, you see, and just last Saturday I had to close my store early, and Tommy and Keith here will tell you the same thing. Mr. Delgado and Mr. Thompson nodded their support. We had to close down early because not enough bloody workers showing up. Left, right, and centre they were all quitting. And you know for what? Pray tell. So they can go bloody Augustown. I've never seen anything like it. The set of fools lining up behind this fucking madman. All of them marching to that dirty little village as if it was some kind of Mecca. If you ask me, they have some strong kind of Africanobia working down there, drawing all these innocent people to it. Mr. Azar, Probyn began with a smile, I appreciate your passion. This was British insincerity, of course. He was mocking the man for a passion he read as foolish and immature. The governor's voice was, as usual, calm, but it now held within it a measure of steel. He did not appreciate this mulatto man banging on his table as if to intimidate him, and therefore felt the need to reassert his authority. Still, I'm not sure what can be done here. Surely you are not worried that Mr. Bedward is truly going to fly to heaven and come back with lightning to smite us. And as far as the law is concerned, there's nothing against him proclaiming his intention to fly, however ridiculous we know those claims to be. We are rational human beings, Mr. Azar. Time and gravity. Those will be the downfall of Bedward. Time and gravity. Businesses being forced to close during the Christmas season. Surely this is a national crisis. This was Mr. Delgado, whose face had gone very red. Your Excellency, Mr. Azar, I am not worried that Bedward is going to fly. Of course I am not. But what he has set off is very dangerous. Dangerous to this country's economy and dangerous to our morality. And all under your watch. You mark my words, Mr. Governor. Something else is brewing under it all. Some kind of uprising. Some kind of a rebellion. Just walk outside and you can feel it in the air. Gentlemen, I have the advantage of having lived in many colonies. So believe me when I tell you this. That feeling is always in the air. Azar lifted his fist as if to bang it on the table again, but caught the warning flash in Probyn's eyes. He relaxed his hand and adjusted his tie again. So you're saying that's it then? All these black hooligans and no-gooders gathering together in Augustown and plotting God he knows what, leading astray the few good Christians working we have in our stores, and the only response from King's House is to shrug, to turn your hands up in the air and say, is so it go? That's what you're saying? Governor Probyn looked directly at Mr. Azar, but made no reply. His face had become its cool, sweatless mask again. While the three men in front of him grew red and anxious and bothered, Probyn stared them down, unflappable. Mr. Azar tried again. Mr. Governor, sir, let me talk plain. You don't like me. You see me as a brash little uncouth man. I know that. Of course I know that. And to be honest, I couldn't give a flying fuck what you limeys think of us. After you leave this bloody island, I will still be here. But what I am telling you is much bigger than whether you like me or not. Something dangerous is brewing on this island, and it has to be stopped. And if you want to stop it, sir, then you have to stop Bedward. Mark my words. If you don't stop it, then worse things are going to be written about your governorship than what the American fella wrote in that book. Trust me. And Richard Azar shrugged magnificently, as if depositing the weight of the world in the governor's lap. Sir, I've taken enough of your time. Good morning, Mr. Governor. Richard Azar nodded his head and left the office. Mr. Delgado and Mr. Thompson hastily shook the hand of the governor and ran to catch up with him. Chapter 10. In Augustown back then, there were many kinds of stories. Bible stories and Anansi stories. Book stories and Susu stories. Stories read by lamplight and stories told by moonlight. But always there was this divide between the stories that were written and stories that were spoken. Stories that smelt of snow and faraway places, and stories that had the smell of their own breath. It had been believed, in an unsaid sort of way, that a story would never be written about Augustown. But this all changed with the advent of the flying preacher man. The people added to their taxonomy of stories a new kind, the newspaper story, and this seemed to fall somewhere in between what was written and what was spoken. For as they waited for the 31st of December to come, they would gather each night in the churchyard, and someone would roll out the Jamaica Gleaner, and, like an Anansi storyteller, would read to them the story of themselves. It hardly mattered that these stories were mostly negative, that they were being mocked. It mattered only that they had been noticed and written about. Bedward himself would be among his flock as these newspaper stories were read out each night. He was comfortable now, floating back and forth above the crowd like a ministering angel. And perhaps it was with this nightly demonstration of his flying power that made the reading of these stories such a jovial affair, because Augustown knew something that these newspaper people did not know. They could see what the rest of Jamaica refused to see. The stories they read on such nights included this one. The Gleaner, Kingston, Jamaica, Wednesday, December 15, 1920, titled, What Phase Is This? He began as Bedward, metamorphosed into Father Bedward, and has attained the dignity of Lord Bedward. He commenced as one who could stare at the sun as it rode in the heavens in all its majesty and glory at noontide. He now aspires to ascend to heaven like Elijah, possibly in a chariot of fire, but at all events amidst the shouts and acclamations of his followers, who at this moment profess to be preparing for the judgment day. Thus has Mr. Bedward evolved from a simple country peasant into a religious leader and prophet of thousands, and now one is wondering whether we have reached the last phase of Bedwardism, or whether we should expect any further development in the mentality and position of this interesting person. As our special representative, WGS, has graphically described in our impressions of yesterday and today, Bedward has been uttering strange and weird predictions for some little time, and these have obtained an almost island-wide circulation. Just as nearly 30 years ago, Bedward was alleged to have asserted that a black wall was about to overwhelm the white wall of Jamaica, which words might have meant anything, but probably meant nothing. So now he is alleged to be prophesying woe and lamentation, the destruction of the city of Kingston, the end of the world, universal ruin, and the translation of himself to heaven. This last would be a most interesting occurrence. We have never seen anyone translated to heaven, but of course, the Lord Bedward is able to fall back on precedent. Enoch, a biblical character, is supposed to have been caught up in the skies without suffering disease. Elijah was also transported to the higher regions by chariots and horses of fire. We believe that at various times since then, our prophets and men of religious note have given out that they were too great to perish like ordinary mortals, but merely disappeared from earth. Empedocles, the Greek philosopher, is believed to have thrown himself into Etna in the hope of deluding his followers that he had passed from earth into a manner mysterious and supernatural. It may be that Mr. Bedward has read about Empedocles. He certainly is acquainted with the history of Enoch and Elijah. So he fixes the 31st for his translation, for Kingston's destruction, and for various other happenings. And many of his followers, who are always looking for the end of the world or some other extraordinary occurrence, have now made Augustown a scene of wilder fanaticism than before, a scene of religious revelry which degenerates into orgies and reduces those who take part in them into Corbians almost below the level of rational human beings. The 31st is not far distant, and the fools that have sold their properties in anticipation of the translation of Lord Bedward and the consummation of the world will assuredly be regretting their precipitate action before many weeks have passed. If their awakening to a sense of their folly would mean the end of Bedwardism, we should not at all regret the sacrifice that they have made. But will anything mean the end of Bedwardism for many years to come? When the day passes and Bedward finds that the chariots and horses of fire, or perhaps the Super 6 automobile of flame, has not arrived on time, what will he do? There is always suicide as a resort. One can always die. But the most of us have no desire to die, and Lord Bedward is not at all likely to adopt a common and ordinary means of leaving a world which has witnessed this great effort towards reformation. When therefore he finds that no conveyance has been sent for him from heaven, he will probably have a new revelation. He may then explain to his followers that the world has been given another chance, and that he has been commanded to remain in it for a little longer, in order to bring more souls to be washed in the water of Augustown. He will be implicitly believed, for the people who flock to him desire to believe in his mission, are intent upon subscribing to any doctrine he may enunciate, so long as it appeals to their febrile religious emotions and erotic impulses. If Bedward died tomorrow, another prophet would arise in his place. His baptisms would still be carried on. Crowds would still make the pilgrimage to Augustown, and every now and then a new prophecy would be proclaimed. For Bedward and his like deal in the primitive stuff of religious emotionalism, fervid gesticulation, frenzied dances, wild shouts and cries, vague utterances of presumable terrible import. All these appeal to undisciplined, uninstructed people. So Bedwardism will continue even if Bedward disappears. It will continue until the people are sufficiently educated to perceive the folly of the claims of a so-called prophet and have developed a sufficient sense of social pride to feel ashamed at being connected with an orgiastic revival of primitive superstitions. And also this, the Jamaica Gleaner, Kingston, Jamaica, December 30, 1920. Bedwardites look for the ascension tomorrow. The followers of the prophet Bedward, the self-styled Lord and Master of Augustown, are confidently expecting his ascension on Friday of this week, and the destruction of Kingston as a climax to the event. Meanwhile, the poor, misguided people are flocking to the village in large numbers with their offerings, but of what possible use these will be to their Lord, who is to depart to regions unknown, it is hard for even them to say. A visitor at Augustown yesterday morning had a novel experience. He arrived at the camp at about 9:30 o'clock, and approaching the bungalow in the veranda of which Mr. Bedward, with numerous followers crowded about, he was accosted by a man with the query, "Do you want to see him?" Accepting the invitation, which was just what the stranger wanted, he went in, following a path which was made for him through the throng. Arrived at the top of a few steps and in front of the prophet, a woman mad with fanatical zeal rushed at him and held him by the collar. His interviewer, realizing that a personal struggle might have ended in others joining the affair, perhaps with disastrous consequences, retained his presence of mind and requested the prophet to ask his disciples to be more gentle. He approached Lord Bedward, who, sitting in front of his house with his stick in his hand, dressed in a white tunic kind of coat, white trousers and shirt, his feet unshod, with his grizzly hair and beard turning white, surrounded by a large crowd, alternately gesticulating, murmuring, and quiet, presented a striking appearance. "Good morning, Mr. Bedward," was the stranger's first essay, but the Lord treated this salutation with contempt. The visitor perceived what was lacking and hurriedly amended his greeting, saying with effusion while he offered his hand, "Hail, Lord and Masterful Bedward! The morning greets you." This warmed the prophet up a bit, and his face was illumined with a smile. He was evidently pleased with the suffix to master, and he arose and proceeded to give a long, rambling, disjointed account of his history. It was difficult to understand him, but amidst very undignified language, his interviewer gathered that Lord Bedward had a grievance against the governor and other gentlemen that he was the Son of God, and therefore claimed title Lord and Master. Then came the grand climax of his ascension, which he still maintains will come off at 10 o'clock on Friday morning, immediately followed by the destruction of the city, when white and black rascals shall perish. This harangue had the effect of working up his followers to a high state of frenzy, and the stranger, thinking that discretion was the better part of valor, his sole aim now was to make a speedy departure. Therefore, he did not question the prophet as to the manner of his flight through the air. He bade the Lord and Master a polite goodbye and shook hands with him again. The second handshake was heartier, but the stranger within the gates was not yet to be released, for the prophet had much more to say, most of which seemed quite incoherent. The references to the destruction of white and black rascals, particularly the former, continued with the rise and fall of the prophet's oratory, which was punctuated by the murmurings of his people, A quotation from the Bible now and again, being taken up by his most well-read disciples. However, the opportunity came at last, and the stranger asked if he might be present at the ascension, at the same time holding out his hand, which was now clasped quite heartily. The stranger's parting words were, "Be good to your flock." Passing, apparently unconcernedly through the crowd, the stranger stopped opposite the large building he took to be Bedouin's church. Accosting a disciple as to whether it was Mr. Bedouin's church, he soon realized his lapsus linguae, for followers crowded round shouting, "Jesus Christ, Lord and Master, the Son of God." Our friend saw it was time to make himself scarce, so without further inquiries about the prophet's church, he quickened his pace and left the excited people to themselves and their Lord. On his way from Augustown, questions put to pilgrims of the new Mecca elicited the fact of their great faith in Bedouin. The possibility of their ascending Lord revising his plans would be regarded by many as the will of God. The last episode of The Stranger was a reply of a girl some way from Augustown, from whom information had been requested as to the way to take back to Hope Road. The conversation revealed her belief in the prophet's genuineness. Shown a New Testament with the statement that she could read in it all about Antichrist, the girl only shrugged her shoulders and muttered something unintelligible. The stranger's convictions are that many of the prophet's followers are probably more fanatic than he is himself. Their enthusiasm might result in anything at the word of the master. The whole affair shows lack of education in the poor people who follow blindly, much as though they lived 400 or 500 years ago in the witch doctor superstition of African wilds. After the disillusionment, some may remain resigned to their fate, and many will be disappointed, some bitterly, and this in many cases after having disposed of their earthly possessions with no regard for their future. Finally, although Bedouin was not more abusive than usual, his lurid language became lost to the interviewer. In its general incoherence, steps should be taken at least by the authorities to put a stop to the obscenities which many witnesses can testify accompanied the prophet's ministrations. End of the Jamaica Gleaner article. End of chapter 10.